Where does the right to rule actually come from? It's a huge question, right? It's one that has built empires and torn them down for centuries. Today, we're going to dive into one very powerful, very uncompromising answer to that question, the idea of divine sovereignty.
So, who's really in charge? Is it kings? Is it governments? Is it, the will of the people? Or what if all of those human systems are kind of missing the point? In this explainer, we're going to unpack a framework that says there's only one single higher source of law, and that everything else is basically a detour.
Okay, so let's jump right in. At the heart of this whole idea is a pretty fundamental conflict. It's really a showdown between two competing sources of law, the rules we human beings create for ourselves versus rules that are believed to come from a divine source.
I mean, just think about it for a second. We are surrounded by them, right? The decrees of ancient kings, the traditions our ancestors passed down, the laws our modern governments pass. These are all systems of human authority. They're just rules made by people for other people.
Now, this framework has a really specific word for these human systems, especially when they go too far. The term is Taghut. It basically refers to any authority, a king, a government, even a tradition, that steps over the line set by divine law. In short, it's any system that claims the right to make the rules in a space that's supposedly reserved only for God.
Okay, so if all these human-made systems are potentially this flawed thing called Taghut, then what's the alternative? Well, the answer gets us to the absolute core principle of this whole worldview. It's this idea of legislative sovereignty.
It's all built on this foundational concept called Tawhid, which you might know as absolute oneness. But here's the crucial part. In this context, Tawhid isn't just a spiritual belief, it's a political and a legal declaration. The logic goes like this. If there is only one creator, then that creator must be the only one who can legitimately make the laws, period.
And the flip side of Tawhid is something called Shirk. That's associating partners with the creator. But get this. From this perspective, the most serious kind of Shirk isn't, bowing to a statue. It's obeying a human law that goes against divine law. Because when you do that, you're essentially giving a piece of God's ultimate authority over to other created beings.
This is one of the key verses that's often pointed to. And it's super direct. Legislation is not but for a law. It couldn't be clearer. And notice that connection it makes. It links the act of worship directly to whose laws you choose to follow. So from this point of view, obedience to the law is an act of worship.
So let's really break this down and put them side by side. On one side, you've got human law. According to this view, it's temporary, it's flawed, it often serves special interests, and it ultimately leads to what's called facade, which is like corruption or social decay. Then on the other side, you have divine law. This is presented as eternal, perfect, and designed to establish universal justice, that's adl, and to create this perfect cosmic balance, known as mizan.
So, a big question comes up, right? If God is the only one making the laws, then what are we supposed to be doing down here? Well, this is where the whole framework moves from just being a theory to being a practical mission, like a blueprint for actually building a society.
And the core idea here is called Khalifa, which translates to something like stewardship or being a trustee. In this view, humanity's job isn't to invent new laws from scratch. Instead, it's to act as caretakers, as stewards, whose mission is to put that divine blueprint into action right here on Earth. And this mission really unfolds in 3 clear steps. It all starts with Ibadah, which means actively obeying the Creator's law. That's the foundation. From that obedience, the goal is to establish adl, a truly just social system. And the end result of all this? To prevent facade, that corruption and decay we talked about, from ever taking hold.
And we are not talking about easy, convenient justice here. The commitment has to be absolute. I mean, this verse makes it so clear. You have to stand firm for justice no matter what, even if it goes against your own interests or your parents or your closest family. The principle of justice is paramount. It is completely non-negotiable.
So this isn't just about some abstract duty. This is where it gets really practical, because this commitment is believed to have massive, real-world consequences. This brings us to a huge idea about how nations rise and fall, a direct cause and effect link between the laws a society follows and, well, its ultimate destiny.
And this verse right here is absolutely central to that idea. It's basically laying out a principle of social physics, if you will. It says that the condition of a people, whether they're thriving or suffering, isn't going to be changed by some force from the outside. The change has to come from within. It comes from the collective choices and the moral compass of the people themselves. So to put it simply, a nation's destiny is in its own hands. The success or the failure of a society is seen as the direct, almost predictable outcome of the legal and moral system it collectively chooses to adopt and live by.
But wait a second, how does a whole society change? Well, the framework argues that even though the consequences are felt by everyone, the responsibility starts with the individual. You, me. The source material is clear. Your choices ultimately benefit or harm your own soul. No one can carry your burden and you can't carry theirs.
So let's make that crystal clear. Think of society as the stage. The individual is the actor. Every single person stands alone in their accountability for what they do. That individual responsibility is the fundamental building block for this entire system of justice and destiny. All right, let's bring it all together and get to the final takeaway. What we've explored here isn't just some interesting theory. It's presented as a fundamental choice. A choice between two completely different systems for law, for life, and for governance. And this table here lays it out perfectly clear. You've basically got two paths. Path 1, you can follow human authority and live by man-made law. The outcome of that, according to this view, is fasad, or corruption. Or there's path 2. You can follow divine authority and divine law, and the promised outcome there is adl, or true justice.
So the ultimate takeaway, the real bottom line, is this. This isn't about fate or random chance. The state of any society is seen as the direct result of a deliberate, collective choice. And depending on which system is chosen, human or divine, the outcome, whether it's justice or decay, is seen as totally predictable. Which leaves us with one final, big question to think about. If a society is really just a mirror, reflecting the laws it truly follows deep down, what does our world reflect back at us today? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us.